have to have every conversation on video?
Because we're making a documentary.
Not about us getting lost. We're making a documentary about a witch.
I don't.
We're lost. Admit that first.
No, I know we're not lost.
They're all over the place.
But how do we know it was people?
Well, even if it wasn't, I'm not going to play with that either.
And it's all because of me that we're here now. Hungry and cold and hunted. Just want to apologize to Mike's mom and Josh's mom and my mom.
Tell me where you are, Josh!
I'm gonna die out here.
And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of this early Friday evening here with me in New York. Once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Today will mark the third entry in our month-long series, simply titled Halloween Horror. So far, we've discussed two iconic 70s classics, the first one being the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and the second one being Robin Hardy's OG, The Wicker Man. Well, today we're going to move forward in time about a quarter of a century, and we will discuss easily, in my opinion, the most polarizing horror film ever made, 1999's found footage classic, in my opinion, The Blair Witch Project. Now, when I say that something, because not everybody would have the same definition, but in my, when we talk about movies, polarizing means that not just that the film, in this instance, will trigger strong emotion or opinion, but that you have people who know what they're talking about, who are so far apart in terms of how the uptake of this movie, that it is poles, North Pole, South Pole, that you will often have these incredibly wide gulfs in opinion. And you can go on right now, Google, and you can find major players, such as Stephen King. Stephen King has said this is top 3 greatest horror movie ever made. He has had moments where he said it was the scariest film he'd ever seen. This is Stephen King we're talking about. But there are plenty of other people that say it doesn't work for me. And the problem with the Blair Witch Project, it is, from a historical perspective, a very important film. But the problem, let's say for younger audiences, somebody under 30 seeing it for the first time, there have been so many found footage movies that did something different, that were maybe more up-tempo and took the found footage concept and added different kinds of special effects, as Cloverfield, I think, did brilliantly. But Blair Witch Project, to me, is almost a perfect film. Given the limitations of what Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez, those were the creators of the movie, and they had the ideas. And I mean, they get credited with the screenplay, but a lot of it was the 3, kids running around cursing each other out in the woods. So it's kind of like giving Kenneth Branagh credit for the screenplay for Hamlet. The screenplay credit should have gone to Shakespeare. He could have won the Oscar. How many years has he been gone? But the Blair Witch Project is one of those touchstone movies. And I don't mean Disney touchstone. I mean, it was a movie that captured what we call the zeitgeist. It hit at exactly the right time. And 1999 is a big year for movies. There are plenty of people, and I even had a back and forth with a film scholar and author named Brian Raftery, who wrote a book literally arguing that 1999 is the single, I don't know if he says best, but the most important year for movies since the advent of sound. I mean, you can make those kinds of arguments. I believe that as far as Hollywood goes, Hollywood's greatest year was 1993. I think Hollywood put out a higher percentage of all-time great films that year than any other. But these are the kinds of arguments that we love if we're film geeks, film buffs. These are fun arguments because there's no real right answer. It's subjective. We're allowed to have different opinions. It's fine. Nobody gets hurt. You know what I'm saying? Although there was a time at Bev's Gym way back when where myself and, we'll just call him Jamie, a great guy, a very passionate movie person such as myself. And we almost came to blows. I don't think it would have gone particularly well for me, but we almost came to blows when I said, I love Rocky, but it's fucking disgrace the Taxi Driver didn't win Best Picture, and he fucking lost it. So somebody almost did get hurt, and I don't think it would have been him in this particular instance. But the Blair Witch Project was made on, here's a cliche, on a shoestring budget. Now, nobody knows exactly how much money Myrick and Sanchez spent. I mean, there have been different numbers, and this is, again, you Google it, you're going to get different answers depending on what page you're on. But they did the kind of Robert Townsend Hollywood shuffle, and even Spike Lee did this, where you max out as many credit cards as you can. You make the movie however the fuck you possibly can get it done, and you just try to make the best film you can. So they hired these 3 actors, one of whom, and Joshua Leonard, had gone on to have a very solid career, and he's been in some high-profile films. Joshua Leonard ended up having a pretty reasonably sized supporting role in Men of Honor. That was a film with Mr. De Niro and Cuba Gooding Jr., among others. And Heather Donahue and Michael C. Williams were the 3 principals. And when you have an idea for a horror film, you can visualize this should work, this should be scary, but until you actually shoot it, or until you assemble the footage, or both, you don't really know. And this was the right time for this sort of movie, and it's actually set years before 1999. I feel they did that because it was more likely, for example, in 1994, that 3 people might go into the woods without a cell phone. I believe by 1998 or 99, you're starting to stretch credulity. Somebody's going to have a cell phone. But it's set in 94, and it's not that crazy to think that nobody was going to have one of those stereo-sized cell phones. Because I remember what those looked like. I used to see him on the train every now and then in the mid-90s. This is ridiculous. It's like what are you doing here? It looked like another appliance. It was very, very, yay big, as they say, and the reception sucked. But they had the idea. They set the actors in the woods. They gave them concepts and, okay, we're going to probably do this and we're going to do that. And they made their movie. And when they were able to start to show it to a few people here or there, and we don't know exactly who said what, but the initial reaction, I'm saying before film festivals, before it hit Sundance, the 99 Sundance in January, I believe that year was. But before that, when they showed a few people they knew, what do you think? The buzz started to build then. That's how because if you're unknown, you don't just show up. For example, I make a movie and I just show up at the Sundance Film Festival. And then what? Get the fuck out of here. Who the hell are you? You have to have some kind of either backers or some process or means to get a film into a film festival. It's not that crazy of an idea. It makes sense. So whoever they talked to first, whoever saw the movie in its completed form, with the music and everything, whoever saw it first before it hit the festival circuit, had to have said, you guys have something here. I've never seen anything like it, whatever it is. And I should also point out, earlier in the decade, 8 years prior, although he had a slightly bigger budget and he had some big hitters in the cast, when Quentin Tarantino showed Reservoir Dogs, when he was able to get that into, thanks to, it turned out to be Harvey Weinstein, among others, but having Harvey Keitel and having Michael Madsen in the cast, that's different. He had, that was a brand name recognition kind of thing, even though Keitel's career had kind of hit the skids, it's hard to imagine. At that point, he still was a name. And that's kind of how Tarantino even got his foot in the door, but that's a whole other story. But that was a situation where the Sundance Film Festival, people went fucking crazy. When they saw Reservoir Dogs, everybody hit the ceiling. So when they were able to get the Blair Witch Project into the Sundance Film Festival, now just as somebody it was still relatively early days of the internet, there was a lot of information, but nothing like it would be now, 25 years later. But I remember reading a dispatch, I think it was a guy named Jeffrey Wells, who I think he still writes, but he wrote for Mr. Showbiz, and he had a whole bunch of different movie columns, and he was one of the first people who did a lot of online work. He and, Roger Ebert obviously is different, but Ebert had his own corner of the internet before most people were even on it. But I think it was Jeffrey Wells who said, everyone here at the festival is buzzing about this horror movie. They're going crazy. And I don't know if he had seen it at that point, but that's where the movie got on my radar. Nowadays, especially here in the States, we have so many advantages. There are movies that, even forgetting COVID, hitting streaming and being in theaters at the same time. There is so much less of a lead time, usually, from when you first hear of a film that is wrapped, not that it's still being worked on and it's a year away, but a film that is wrapped, and then you usually wouldn't have to wait 6 months, 7 months. Well, in this case, you're talking January 1999, and so many people went bonkers when they saw this movie that it started a bidding war, and there were a lot of different people involved, but they ended up like Artisan Entertainment, and I forgot who else. But they announced a release date of July 30th. And I remember with everything I read about it, and there were so many different dispatches from that festival from people, sometimes using their name, and other times we have so-and-so is saying this, but the buzz was so strong. There were a few people saying it didn't work, but there were too many having the Stephen King reaction of, holy shit, this is a top 5 greatest horror film. I don't know how they pulled it off. There was a lot of that. And I always appreciate when someone does something different. I appreciate the kind of pioneering spirit and the risk-taking aspect of that, because it feels like entrepreneurship. And that's what it feels like. Myrick and Sanchez here were just throwing caution to the wind and taking their shot. And they could have ended up, spending 80 grand and getting themselves in massive credit card debt. But you could do that just going to college. But they were taking a risk. And every indication said, these guys, whether or not they have big careers, they're not going to ever have to worry about money ever again. And most people who see it really like it. So that was the buzz. But here you have a situation where a film is wrapped, a deal is struck, and a release date is out there. But the release date is 6 months away. And there was no process. They'll download it to the internet. No, it didn't happen. What they did do on the internet, though, the other ingenious thing was the marketing campaign. Now, I knew just from this particular sequence of events and the time, this was a found footage film that purported to be a documentary. It was not a documentary. It was not a snuff film. Meaning nobody really died during the making of this movie. No animals were harmed. No actors were maimed or disappeared and they're really dead during the making of this movie. But the website, the original website for this film, teasing people, being able to see it at some point, it suggested the story was true. 3 student filmmakers disappeared while filming a documentary near Burkittsville, Maryland. A year later, their footage was found. Now that's the tagline for the movie, but that was also used to promote the film on the website. So there were a lot of movies in 1999 that I was really looking forward to. Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. I'm actually a fan. My generation is supposed to hate the prequels. They suck. George Lucas destroyed my childhood. I hate George Lucas. These movies. I thought part 1 was the best of the trilogy, the prequel trilogy, right? I'm supposed to not like Phantom Menace, and I'm supposed to like Attack of the Clones despite the dialogue not being so good. Yoda and Dooku and Christopher Lee, one of my favorite people in the history of the movie business as Count Dooku. And I'm supposed to love Revenge of the Sith. I don't. I watched it one time in the movies. No, thank you. I'm good. No interest in seeing it ever again. I think film is a huge disappointment. Forget that. The second Austin Powers movie, I was really looking forward to. And there were just a lot of big films that year. American Beauty, which I thought was kind of a disappointment. The Sixth Sense, another big one from that year. The Matrix. I mean, you could argue The Matrix is the best film of that year. I wouldn't have any problem if you told me that. I mean, what an incredible mindfuck. A great action movie, a great science fiction film. So big hitters up and down the roster. But the one movie I was most looking forward to, as much as Phantom Menace, the Blair Witch Project. And there are certain times where you see a movie, and if you're a big movie fan, you could speak to this in your own head, just kind of run it through the mental meat grinder, as they say, where you remember everything about a particular trip to the movies and the experience of seeing a particular film in a theater at that particular time. So my dad had also done some reading on this, and we went to the Broadway Mall in Hicksville to see, on opening night, the Blair Witch Project, and the buzz was so strong that it was playing on 2 screens, and that was a huge movie theater. It still is. So it was one of those where they had a 7 o'clock and a 7:30. It was either on 2 or 3 screens, but the word that they got, this film's going to be through the roof. And there were big movies that were playing, like The Phantom Menace, and I'm not sure if The Sixth Sense had come out yet. It might have. But we saw it, and before the movie, a bunch of people, mostly very young people, were whispering to me, "Is it real? Is it real? Are we about to watch this? Is this a real documentary?" I don't know. Now, of course I did know, but I figured I would kind of fuck around. Yeah, I don't know. So we watched the movie, and I remember the first half hour thinking, well, this isn't really scary. This is like MTV's The Real World, as these 3 kids are, getting frustrated and they're yelling at each other and they're cursing and they're arguing. And it didn't really seem to be doing that much. But then things start to go wrong, and you begin to get the idea that there is some different forces at work here. There is stuff happening that does not happen in the natural world. Holy shit. Holy shit. The last 20 minutes of this film, for me, are extraordinary. And regardless of how many found footage movies you've seen, whether you're a big fan of Cloverfield, as I am, or, the Paranormal Activity, some of those. And I recently saw a very solid entry in this kind of subgenre, The Taking of Deborah Logan. Very interesting what they did there. The last 20 minutes of Blair Witch Project are extraordinary. They're incredible. And I was hooked early. Even though it wasn't scary, I was not bored. I was interested to see where it was going to turn and how it was going to turn out. But when you start to get to, and I'll stay away from spoilers, when you start to get to a point where you realize the filmmakers are in serious trouble here, they're going to run out of food, they're going to run out of water, and they appear to be walking in circles, even though they're not walking in circles. There is some kind of enchantment. How is this going to turn out? And so the suspense builds, even though you don't have that kind of artificial, not that there's anything wrong with jump scares, but the suspense starts building in a kind of creeping way, in a hairs raised on the back of your neck kind of way. And it's not easy to do, especially there's no special effects here, or I shouldn't say none. There are very few there are no conventional special effects. Let's put it that way. But the tension begins to slowly build. And I remember, again, not giving anything away for those who haven't seen it, this is a seminal horror film. This is as important, in my opinion, to the genre as The Exorcist, as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There's 2 movies one from 73 and one from 74. It's as important as the original Wicker Man, which does something a little bit different. If you like Midsommar, you'll love the Wicker Man, that kind of thing. But the Blair Witch Project changed the game. It changed the way that horror movies not were made, but could be made. Because there's a whole wide range of horror movies. Arnold Schwarzenegger's Predator, if you want to have an actual argument with me, that is a horror movie. And that's a hill I will go down on, and I will give you not scientific proof. I'll give you cinematic proof as to why that's first horror film, second action thriller. But again, it's not that important. The experience of seeing the Blair Witch Project, when I tell you the last 20 to 30 minutes, as the tension begins to get almost unbearable, there was not a sound in that theater. There wasn't a seat to be had. There was no sound. Nobody was moving. Nobody was crunching popcorn or crunching munch or candy wrappers. Don't we love when a horror movie is interrupted by people fucking around with candy wrap? Nothing. There was no sound. And when the film concluded, it was just, if you'll excuse the pun, dead silence. it's as if everybody could not believe what they had seen. Now, my estimation is at least 3/4 of the audience reacted as I did and as my father did. We both thought that we had seen a top 5 best horror films that we had ever seen. And you wouldn't necessarily have thought that my old man would have reacted the way he did. Dad was 50, he was 56. Jesus, he seemed older to me. Of course he seemed older to me. I was 25. But he loved it. And I think the fact that he read about it and he kind of had an idea of where it was going, it didn't hurt. Okay, he may have had the whole movie spoiled for all I know. He may have known how it was going to turn out. But he had a look when we left the theater, almost the cat that ate the canary. He saw how shaken up. He wasn't as scared as I was. He just was with the story, and at the end, he just had a reaction of like, wow, that he had just seen a great film. And he thought it would be entertaining. He wasn't expecting to have the reaction that he did as far as, no, Jared, this is a great movie. I'll tell everybody, this movie is fantastic. So there were still people as we were leaving, now even more shaken than before. Was that real? Was that real? Are they okay? Was that really? Is that what I think? Did that really just happen? People were very disturbed. And there were some people that were laughing. That's what I mean when I say this is polarizing. There are plenty of people, and listen, you could be one of them. You could, maybe I've never seen it. Now you watch it and you'll be like, bro, it's 84 minutes of boredom. Nothing happens. Well, you're entitled. I know plenty of people that say the only thing scary is that I didn't get my money back, kind of making joke about it. But for a certain percentage, in this case, I would say at least 3/4 that night, just blown out of the back wall of the theater as far as the reaction. And just for myself, I've seen a lot of scary movies in my day, a lot of really scary movies. The Blair Witch Project messed me up more than anything else. At 2 a.m. that night, my heart rate was at 180 and I could not relax. I kept hearing, mild spoiler, the character of Heather, I kept hearing her scream in my head. I could not shake the sound of her scream, and I could not shake the final images. And Stephen King also, this is not a spoiler, he's also talked about this, that the last couple of minutes of the movie, he has never been able to just be okay with it and not have a visceral reaction. That is how much this movie got to him. I feel like it got to him as much as me, or vice versa. And he's not shy. There's tons of interviews where he sings the praises of the Blair Witch Project and how much he just loves it. And it's so fucking scary is what he says. Finally, at about 4 a.m., I was so exhausted, I passed out asleep. But I understand, what do they call it, fetishistic scopophilia? The fact that we can gain certain levels of pleasure just from looking, and we know it's not real. We have the safety blanket in our heads. We know it's not real. I knew that it wasn't real, but I reacted as if it was. I was scared to death, almost. That is why my heart rate was 180. Now, I knew the Blair Witch wasn't going to get me, but my body chemistry reacted as though I was in mortal danger. I cannot think of another movie that did that. I don't have any explanation other than, I guess I was the target audience and, nail meet head, as they say. So that was my experience seeing it in theaters. I saw it again in theaters. I actually liked it more all the way through the second time, because there are lots of clues that are dispersed early that the first time you watch the movie, you don't realize that they're clues. You don't realize that, hey, that those two friendly guys that are fishing, they're actually giving the filmmakers very good information, and they're not really paying attention to it. They're not really getting what they could out of this, because if they really were listening, they should have, turn around and just, you know what, better luck next time. Let's do something else. Maybe this isn't the best possible thing we could be doing with our lives at this exact moment. The Blair Witch Project has been on, I know it had a very successful run on Netflix right around COVID, I think. And it's been on and off. It's on Shudder. You might be able to find it for free. I know it's been on, as I said, some of the, like Shudder and, some of the other horror channels. And there's always a chance you could find a print on YouTube before they take it down. But this is a film that gets, again, my highest recommendation. And if you ask me, is this movie, in my opinion, scarier than The Wicker Man? Scarier than The Exorcist, which is a great movie. Forget horror, just a great movie. Scarier than the original Texas Chainsaw? For me, yes. Those movies frightened me. This film scared the living daylights out of me. No exaggeration, and I'm not ashamed to say it. It's just how I happen to react to this fantastic film. I don't really like any of the sequels. Book of Shadows Part 2, even though Jeffrey Donovan is great, bad movie. And the one from 2016, no good. And there's talk that A24 wants to do a hard reboot. It's not going to work. They're going to have to do something completely different. You cannot replicate what Eduardo Sanchez and Daniel Myrick did. They captured lightning in a bottle, and I believe the movie business was for the better. The movie business benefited significantly from their kind of flight of fancy, just taking huge risks and nailing it. Boom. The Blair Witch Project, the third entry in our month-long series of Halloween horror. This has been episode 325 of the Confessions of a Not-So-Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Friday evening here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Until then, peace.